So I'm currently standing in the airport while this lady, this lady is patting me down. I tell myself, do not feel uncomfortable, Hannah. You are about to be deployed for the Army and you cannot be acting like such a wussy. Okay. I'm 19 years old.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Debating for America's Youth. Today we have another very special interview. Today we are interviewing Kimberly Lee, who is the 2018 NSDA National Champion in Dramatic Interpretation. Welcome, Kimberly.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, so the first question is, how did you get started in debate? How did you hear about it? And what made you want to stick with doing speech and debate?
I started at freshman year of high school when I was 14, so that was back in 2014. At my high school, the theater department is very, very closely connected with the speech and debate. We have the same coach as we have the same theater director. So I was always really interested in theater. I did theater in middle school, and coming up to high school, I heard that if you want to do well in the theater department, you have to join speech and debate. And in my mind, I was like, what is the correlation? You know, debate is definitely not anything like acting.
Mm-hmm.
But long story short, I ended up joining it in conjunction with theater, and then ended up falling in love with speech and debate more. I decided to stay just because I love the originality and creativity and just how much breath you have to be original within speech and debate. I feel like in so many things, you're given, like, you have to do this topic and you write about it, or, you know, you're given a script and you have to perform it, little things like that. But with speech and debate, it's like you have the opportunity to pick and choose what you want, cut it how you want, different things like that.
Definitely. So when you got started in speech and debate, I know you did theater as well, but did you get nervous in front of speaking in front of people? And if so, how did you kind of work to overcome that?
Oh God, I definitely really got nervous in the beginning. I remember right before my very first tournament, I was like, can I just practice this in my high school? Can I just not compete?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing I can do? I basically just pushed myself to get past it, but I had this thought. So it was really embarrassing, but I don't know. I think she was the 2015 DI champion, Abigail Onrenali. She's also an alumni of my college now, University of Texas at Austin. So I very, very much looked up to her, and I loved her performance style. So what I basically told myself is, anytime I would practice, I would tell myself every single person in every single, I just knocked my teeth. Every single person in every single round is going to be as good as Abigail Onrenali, and if you don't practice your butt off, you're going to make a fool of yourself. So I would, every time I was feeling sluggish or didn't really feel like I wanted to practice, I would tell myself that. It would get me on my feet because I wouldn't want to be embarrassed at a competition. And eventually, because I would practice so hard and I would have this mindset, I would go into competitions feeling confident. Obviously, the nerves never completely go away,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, you find ways to manage it, like whether listening to music or taking a walk, or I would sometimes change the lock screen on my phone before big competitions and competitions itself to little sayings as to why I'm exactly doing it so that I wouldn't get off course and I would motivate myself to go in the right direction.
Definitely. And when you got onto the big national stage, how did it feel to be up there? Were you really nervous in front of all the people?
Definitely. Definitely nervous. I think I was more confused than anything. I had semifinaled the previous years before that in POI, and so I had already stood on that stage and seen the audience before. But I think what was really interesting about Fort Lauderdale is that you could see everybody in the audience. I remember standing on the stage in Alabama or in Salt Lake City, and I couldn't see anybody. I was like, oh, that's not too bad. But I remember walking out there for sound check and being like, oh wow, I can see everybody. And so walking out there, all the these little things just started to get me nervous. Like walking across the stage, it creaked a little bit. I was like, oh no, is that going to happen like on camera? Like, are they going to get the noise of the sound? And then I also was like worried because I know myself and I know that I drag out a lot of my performances, especially if I'm given like not that much of a time limit. So I was worried I would drag it out too much. I definitely did, but yeah, there's just like nerves all around of all these little things, you know, added on to just regular performance. It was like everyone's eyes are on you. Of course you're going to be nervous about that.
Definitely. And you talked about like previous years doing POI. Why did you make the switch from POI into DI, at least for the national performance?
Yeah, for sure. It was a really, really hard decision for sure. I really, really loved POI. But I think my senior year, I just had a deep, deep, deep connection with my DI to the point where when I went to district, I didn't take POI as well. I dropped that auto-qual. I took DI, and I said, DI, you're nothing, basically. Like, I wouldn't want to go unless it's DI because this is a story that I really wanted to share. And it took me months and months and months to make that decision. It wasn't an easy one. It wasn't off the fly for sure.
What was your DI?
What was my DI? Or
Yes, well, yeah, what was your DI you used for your senior year?
what was my DI I used for senior year?
Or yeah, like what was the performance you used at nationals?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, so the piece you used to win nationals, what was the DI about? Like what was the piece about?
Yes, for sure. Sorry, the audio cut out a little bit.
You're fine.
So the piece I used was Silence Broken, and it's basically from the perspective of a Korean adoptee living in America who doesn't really know much about our culture. She was raised in America, doesn't really know much about South Korea in general, and she's in the military, fresh in the military, and she goes to see her mother, her birth mother in South Korea, because she finds that, like, she's like, I want to go see her, you know, I want to learn about my culture. So she heads to South Korea, and she's met with her mother's old landlord, who tells her the story about comfort women during World War II and how, you know, her mother was used as basically a sex slave, and the impacts and the struggle that she has within her own nationality versus her heritage. And I very much chose that because I knew I wanted to focus on comfort women itself going into senior year. But everything I was finding was pretty much just from the perspective of a comfort woman. And while that may work for people and while some people feel as if they have the agency for that, and that's totally fine, I didn't feel like I would be comfortable playing that. And I thought it would be more comfortable for me to try to find someone that was more of my perspective outside looking in. I was born in New York, you know, I didn't immigrate from Korea, so I grew up here. So I definitely wanted to look from the perspective of somebody outside looking in, but still with a personal connection.
Mm-hmm. So with when you're looking at pieces, you look for things that you have a personal connection to over ones that you think will be a good piece during performance?
Yeah, for sure. I think where a lot of people go wrong is asking, what's the next good piece? Or, you know, like, will this have me win? Because ultimately you will be disappointed, right? Mm-hmm. There's not one person, I don't think, that's won every single competition they've been to, right? You're going to be let down at some point. But what's going to satisfy you is, in the end, if you're proud of the work you put up and if you love it to death. So that's why I chose, you know, to go to district in just DI and not poi, because I said DI or nothing. You know, if it doesn't work out, that's fine. I chose what I want to do, and I'm happy with what I wanted to do. So yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah. So you talked about how you practice really hard with the motivation of knowing that there's people who are better than you, especially that one person you looked up to. What specific practices did you do to get better at performing and to get better at memorization and all the things that come with speech?
I definitely suck at memorization. I still today, since I do college speech, I have massive trouble with memorization. But I think it's really about like standing it up. A lot of people are like, sit down, I'm gonna like memorize it. I think you really just have to stand it up and go for it. And I think what a lot of people are guilty of doing, and I'm guilty, is that you have to film yourself, because we are our own worst critics. So by filming ourselves, we see all these nitpicky things that even coaches won't be able to see. And so if you film yourself over and over and do little sections, if you run through it constantly over and over, it's an emotional burnout, right? So if you just focus on little sections here and there, that's definitely something that's a lot easier to manage. Also, I think a huge thing is like blocking. So I believe in super intentional blocking. So I don't believe in anything that's superfluous, right? Only if it contributes to the story. And that doesn't necessarily mean if the script doesn't call for it, don't do it. It means that like if the script calls for it, obviously do it. But it also means like adding the believability and naturality, right? So like a lot of people, let's say if they're drinking from a cup, right? They'll just like throw it back and then put it down. That's not believable, right? Like little snips, like maybe wiping your mouth afterwards or dabbing your lip with a napkin and like seeing the lipstick and like brushing it off. These little details are what I like to focus on. I think my coach always said like, it's easy to get good. It's harder to get to that next level, and that believability is what brings you to that next level.
Definitely. So when you began doing DI, and now that you've done it at a high school level and you're still doing college speech, what would you tell a novice who is just beginning in speech or even DI?
This is golden. I think high school speech has a tendency to yell and overcompensate that way, and especially from a judging standpoint as well. Obviously, having judged high school tournaments, it becomes taxing to go to DI rounds and just be screaming after screaming after screaming, right? So obviously if the script calls for it, if there's some need to use volume, and of course use a range, use a variety of volume, but a climax doesn't necessarily mean yelling. It doesn't necessarily mean screaming. A climax can be very quiet. It can be very still. A lot of people don't use stillness to their full advantage. There's something really beautiful about being able to, it's a very common rule, but like show, not tell. So if you can show, I am sad, I am really disappointed about blank, rather than saying it and just moving on, that takes you to another level.
Yeah, definitely. I think that plays a bunch into it. I've been like, yeah, sometimes it's really good if you like vary your tone or even your volume. That can make it really impactful. Yeah, you're like you were saying. If you get really quiet during a part, that could mean just as much as just shouting during a loud part. I totally agree with you.
Absolutely.
So in closing,
play around with it, yeah.
Totally. So in closing, now that you've been a part of college speech and high school speech, what would you tell the speech and debate community as a whole if you had a message or something you wanted to share with people in the speech and debate community?
Sure. And this is what I spoke out on. I don't think on a huge national level, but I've definitely spoken about this a lot to my close friends, is support underrepresented communities, right? And what I mean by that is like indigenous communities, like Asian community is very small, especially in the inter community. Just like there's a lot of like very small groups out there, and I don't think people realize, like they say like, speech and debate, it's like everyone's seen, everyone's heard, and yes, while that may be true, it's difficult to go through something where you feel like you yourself are the only person that have experienced it, right? And that while that necessarily might not be true, if people around them can show them the support they need, it'll cause people, to stay in the activity. I interviewed a lot of, just because I was doing a speech on Asian loneliness within creator spaces last year, and so I ended up interviewing a ton of competitors, and they were telling me that like it's been a trend to see underrepresented communities, like they'll join one year and then they'll quit the next, they'll join a year and then they'll quit the next, and it's just a cycle of that. So I think if there's intentional support shown with with that like at the front of your mind, then it'll create a stronger community and a sense of belonging.
Definitely. I think that's something that the speech and debate community should definitely address. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your advice with everyone.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.